I'm Robert, 58, male, and I am a retired architect living in a spacious, perhaps too quiet, colonial-style house in the suburbs of Chicago. Since my wife Martha passed away 4 years ago, my life has revolved around my woodworking hobbies and, more importantly, my son Daniel and his wife, Jessica. This story isn't just about a party gone wrong. It's about the terrifying realization that the people we love can be capable of the most desperate, selfish acts imaginable. It's about how a single sentence from a stranger can unravel a perfectly constructed lie. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Chapter 19. The grand celebration. If you knew my daughter-in-law, Jessica, you would know that she doesn't just throw parties. She orchestrates events. She's a professional event planner, the kind who charges 5 figures just to conceptualize a wedding, so you can imagine what happened when it came time to celebrate the arrival of her own child. The garden of Daniel and Jessica's estate, a house I had helped design with its sweeping modern lines and glass walls, was transformed into something out of a fairy tale. It was late spring, the kind of day where the air is crisp, but the sun is warm, and the scent of blooming jasmine seemed to be pumped in by machines, though I knew it was just nature doing its job. There were white silk tents draped over the patio, tables laden with artisanal cheeses, towers of macarons in pastel blues and creams, and a string quartet playing soft, classical renditions of modern pop songs in the corner. It was lavish, it was expensive, it was perfect, and standing in the center of it all was my son Daniel, looking more exhausted and happier than I had ever seen him. Daniel is a civil engineer, a man of logic and structure, much like I was at his age. But for the last 5 years, I had watched that structure crumble under the weight of infertility. I watched my boy grow gray hairs in his early 30s. I watched the light go out of his eyes every time another IVF cycle failed. I watched him comfort Jessica as she wept in our guest room during holidays, unable to bear the sight of her cousin's children. It had been a dark, grueling half-decade. That's why today was so important. "Dad," Daniel said, walking over to me with 2 glasses of champagne. He looked sharp in his navy suit, though his tie was already loosened. "Can you believe this? Look at this turnout." I took the glass, scanning the crowd. There were easily 100 people here. Colleagues, friends, family, neighbors. Everyone wanted to see the miracle baby. "It's a beautiful party, Dan," I said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. Jessica outdid herself. She wanted everything to be perfect for Leo. Daniel said, his voice catching slightly on the name. "Leo, my grandson. After everything we went through, she just wants to celebrate." "I know," I said gently. "Where is the little guy?" "He's inside with the nanny for a quick nap." "Too much stimulation. Jessica is guarding the nursery door like a hawk." I laughed. "She's waited a long time to be a mother. Let her hover." I wandered through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. Everyone knew the story, or at least the version of the story we had been told. The adoption had happened incredibly fast. Suspiciously fast, some might say, but we were too happy to question it. About 6 months ago, Jessica had announced that they were moving to a private adoption agency that specialized in difficult placements. It cost a fortune, money that I had happily contributed to from my retirement savings, because I couldn't stand to see them suffer anymore. Then, 3 weeks ago, we got the call. A birth mother had selected them, a healthy baby boy. It was a closed adoption, everything sealed and confidential, but the baby was theirs. I looked across the lawn and saw Jessica holding court near the fountain. She looked stunning in a flowing cream dress, her blonde hair perfectly waved, laughing at something a friend was saying. She looked radiant, victorious. I made my way over to her. When she saw me, her smile widened, though her eyes scanned the perimeter of the party, a habit of her profession, always checking for flaws in the execution. "Robert," she exclaimed, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Are you having a good time? Did you try the lobster tartlets?" "I'm pacing myself, Jess," I teased. "The party is magnificent. Martha would have loved this." Jessica's expression softened for a fraction of a second. "I know. I put a white rose on the centerpiece table for her. I wanted her to be part of Leo's welcome." That touched me. Jessica and I had always had a cordial relationship, though sometimes I found her intensity a bit overwhelming. She was a perfectionist, driven and ambitious, which balanced out Daniel's laid-back nature. But sometimes her need for control bordered on obsession. During the IVF years, that obsession had turned dark. She tracked temperatures, hormones, and cycles with a military precision that seemed to suck the romance out of their marriage. But today, she was soft. She was a mother. "That means a lot to me," I said. "So, When do we get to see the guest of honor? Soon, she promised, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. He should be waking up in about 20 minutes. I want to bring him out when the cake is cut. I nodded and drifted away, finding a quiet spot near the edge of the property where the manicured lawn met the tree line. I needed a moment to just breathe. I was a grandfather. The title felt heavy and wonderful. I thought about the workshop in my garage, filled with the half-finished rocking horse I had started carving the day Daniel told me the adoption was finalized. I pictured teaching Leo how to hold a pencil, how to read a blueprint, how to build things that lasted. I was sipping my champagne, lost in these daydreams, when I noticed a car pulling up the long driveway. It wasn't like the other cars. The driveway was currently a parking lot of BMWs, Mercedes, and Teslas. This car was an older model sedan, maybe a Honda or a Toyota, rusted around the wheel wells, with a distinct rattle that I could hear even from 50 yards away. It stopped at the security checkpoint Jessica had set up. Yes, she had hired private security for a baby shower. I watched as the guard leaned down to talk to the driver. There was a brief exchange, some gesturing. The guard shook his head. The car didn't move. Curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't just a guest, I was family. If there was an issue, I should probably handle it so Daniel and Jessica didn't have to be disturbed. I set my glass down on a high, top table and walked down the driveway. As I got closer, I could see the driver. It was a woman. She looked to be in her mid-50s, around my age, maybe a little younger. She had graying hair pulled back in a messy bun, and was wearing a frantic expression that made my stomach tighten. "Is there a problem?" I asked as I reached the gate. The security guard, a beefy guy named Mike who I'd met earlier, looked relieved to see me. "Mr. Harris, this lady isn't on the guest list, and she's refusing to turn around." I looked at the woman. Her window was rolled down. She wasn't dressed for a garden party. She wore a faded scrub top and jeans, and her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she hadn't slept in days. But it was the intensity of her gaze that struck me. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking past me, toward the house, toward the white tents and the music. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "This is a private event." She snapped her head toward me. Her eyes were a piercing blue, filled with a mixture of fear and rage. "Is this the Miller residence?" she asked. Her voice was raspy. "It is," I said. "I'm Robert Miller, Daniel's father." "Who are you?" "I need to see the baby," she said. It wasn't a request. It was a demand, but it was spoken with a trembling lip. I frowned. "I'm sorry. You want to see my grandson?" "Your grandson," she repeated, the word sounding bitter in her mouth. She opened the car door and stepped out before Mike could stop her. She was short, but she carried herself with a rigid tension. "I need to see the baby you people just bought." The air suddenly felt very cold, despite the spring sun. "Excuse me," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I don't know who you are, but you need to watch your language. My son and his wife adopted a child through a reputable agency. If you're here to cause trouble—" "Reputable," she scoffed, letting out a sharp, hysterical laugh. "Is that what she told you?" "Elena." The name froze me. Elena. That was the name of the agency director. Jessica had mentioned her dozens of times. "Elena is a miracle worker," Jessica would say. "Elena understands us." "You know Elena?" I asked, stepping closer. The woman didn't answer. She was already moving, pushing past Mike with surprising strength. "I'm going in there," she declared. "Hey!" Mike shouted, grabbing her arm. "Ma'am!" "You need to leave right now or I'm calling the police."
"Let go of me,"
she screamed. The sound cut through the ambient noise of the party. The string quartet stopped playing. A hush fell over the crowd on the lawn. I saw Daniel and Jessica turn around near the fountain. Jessica squinted, trying to see what the commotion was. When she locked eyes with the woman at the gate, I saw it happen. I saw the glass of champagne in her hand slip from her fingers. It shattered on the stone patio, but she didn't even flinch. She just stood there, paralyzed, her face draining of all color until she looked like a wax statue. That was my first clue. Jessica wasn't confused, she was terrified. The woman at the gate, her name, I would learn, was Sarah, broke free from Mike's grip and took a few steps onto the driveway. She didn't run. She just stood there, shouting across the expanse of the manicured lawn, her voice carrying over the silence of the stunned guests. "That baby shouldn't be here!" she screamed. She pointed a shaking finger toward the house. "You stole him!" "You stole him and you know it." Chaos erupted. But in that moment I wasn't looking at the crazy woman screaming at the gate. I was looking at my daughter-in-law. Jessica hadn't moved to defend herself. She hadn't yelled back. She had grabbed Daniel's arm, her fingernails digging into his suit jacket so hard I could see the fabric bunching. She was pulling him back, away from the gate, away from the accusation. "Get her out of here!" Jessica shrieked, her voice high and unnatural. Daniel, get security to remove her. She's crazy! But she didn't look at the woman when she said it. She looked at the ground. I stood there at the gate, my heart hammering against my ribs, realizing that the perfect celebration was just a thin veneer over something rotting underneath. The next 10 minutes were a blur of shouting, confusion, and embarrassment. Mike, the security guard, finally managed to restrain the woman, Sarah. He wasn't rough, but he was firm, pinning her arms behind her back as she thrashed. But she didn't stop screaming. She wasn't screaming profanities or threats, she was screaming names. His name isn't Leo, she yelled, tears streaming down her face now, cutting clean lines through the grime on her cheeks. It's Noah! His name is Noah! I stood just a few feet away, paralyzed by the raw agony in her voice. This wasn't the behavior of a stalker or a random lunatic. This was the sound of a mother, or someone who loved like one. Dad! Daniel came running down the driveway, his face flushed with anger. What is going on? Why is this woman still here? She's leaving, Mike grunted, trying to march Sarah back toward her rusted sedan. I'm not leaving without him! Sarah shouted, twisting her body to look at Daniel. You look like a good man. Don't you want to know where your baby came from? Don't you want to know what Alina did? Daniel stopped in his tracks, about 5 feet away from her. He looked confused, his anger momentarily replaced by bewilderment. Who is Alina? You mean the agency director. What are you talking about? Daniel, don't listen to her! Jessica had appeared behind him. She was breathless, her chest heaving. She had composed herself slightly, but there was a frantic energy vibrating off her. She didn't come close to Sarah. She stayed well back, behind the safety of her husband's shoulder. She's a disgruntled employee, Jessica said quickly, speaking to Daniel but loud enough for the guests nearby to hear. Elena fired her last month for stealing files. She's been harassing the agency's clients. Alina warned me this might happen. It was a smooth lie, plausible, quick. Sarah stopped struggling. She went perfectly still in Mike's grip. She looked at Jessica and her expression shifted from hysteria to cold, hard loathing. Disgruntled employee, Sarah repeated softly. Is that what she told you? I was the head nurse at the clinic, Jessica. I was the one who held your hand when you did your transfer. I was the one who saw the paperwork. Jessica flinched. Get her out of here! Mike shoved Sarah toward the car. Ma'am, you need to go, now. Sarah looked at me, our eyes locked again. In that moment, amidst the shouting and the accusations, she saw something in me. Maybe she saw that I wasn't buying Jessica's story. Maybe she saw the hesitation in my posture. As Mike forced her into the driver's seat, she didn't fight him anymore. But before she closed the door, she shouted one last thing. It wasn't directed at Jessica or Daniel. It was directed at me. Check the birth certificate, Grandpa, she yelled. Check the time of birth. It's impossible! Then she slammed the door. The engine sputtered to life, and she reversed aggressively, tires kicking up gravel, before speeding off down the road. Silence descended on the driveway. Jesus. Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his hair. What a nightmare. He turned to Jessica and wrapped his arms around her. I'm so sorry, babe. Are you okay? Did she scare you? Jessica buried her face in his chest. I'm fine, she muffled. I didn't want today to be ruined. It's supposed to be Leo's day. It's not ruined. Daniel assured her, kissing the top of her head. She's gone, just some crazy lady. Come on, let's go back to the guests. We need to do damage control. They turned and walked back toward the party, arm in arm. Daniel looked protective, the dutiful husband shielding his wife from the world. But Jessica, as she walked away, I saw her glance back over her shoulder. She looked at the spot where Sarah's car had been. And for a second, the mask slipped completely. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like someone who had just barely escaped a firing squad. I didn't follow them immediately. I stood in the driveway, the smell of exhaust fumes mixing with the jasmine. Check the time of birth. It's impossible. What kind of accusation was that? I walked back to the party, but the magic was gone. The guests were huddled in small groups, whispering. The string quartet had started playing again. Vivaldi's Spring, but it felt jarring now. I found my way to the bar and ordered a scotch, neat. My hands were shaking slightly. I watched Jessica working the room. She was incredible, really. Within 10 minutes, she had the crowd laughing again. I overheard her spinning the story. Poor woman. She lost her mind after being let go. It's sad, really, how mental health is ignored in this country. She was turning the intruder into a tragedy that she could pity, positioning herself as the benevolent, understanding victim. It was masterful. And it made me sick. I needed to see the baby. I bypassed the crowd and slipped into the house through the French doors. The air conditioning hit me, cooling the sweat on my neck. The house was quiet compared to the garden. I walked up the grand staircase to the second floor, toward the nursery. The nursery was a masterpiece of interior design. Clouds painted on the ceiling, custom shelving, a crib that probably cost more than my first car. Inside, the nanny, a young woman named Maria, was rocking Leo in a chair. "Mr. Miller," she whispered, smiling. "He's just waking up." "Can I hold him?" I asked. Of course. She carefully transferred the bundle to my arms. Leo was small, warm, and smelled of milk and baby powder. He squirmed slightly, opening his eyes. They were dark, inquisitive. I looked at his face, searching for, I didn't know what. A resemblance. A sign. He was a beautiful baby. He looked perfectly healthy. "He's a good eater," Maria whispered. "Hardly ever cries." I looked down at the little boy. Noah, the woman, had called him. "Maria," I said softly, keeping my voice casual. "Did Jessica leave the baby book in here, the one with the footprints and the hospital bracelet? I wanted to see how big he was at birth." Maria pointed to a shelf near the changing table. "Oh, yes. She's been working on a scrapbook."
It's right there.
My heart rate picked up. I walked over to the shelf, shifting Leo to one arm. I picked up the leather-bound book. It was heavy. Jessica had already filled the first few pages with photos of the nursery. The ultrasound pictures, which I realized were from the birth mother, not Jessica, and the welcome home shots. I turned the page. There was a clear plastic sleeve taped to the paper. Inside was the hospital bracelet. "Baby Boydo, Diva May 12th, time 14:42. May 12th, that was 3 weeks ago. I stared at time 14:42, 2 was then 42 p.m. I tried to recall the timeline. I remembered exactly when Daniel had called me to tell me the baby was born. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, balancing the book on the shelf. I scrolled back through my call history. It took a moment, but I found it. Incoming call, Daniel, May 12th, time 8:15 a.m. I froze. Daniel had called me at 10:15 a.m., sobbing with joy, telling me the baby had been born and was healthy. He said they were at the hospital. But the bracelet, the official hospital ID, said the baby was born at 2:42 p.m., 4 hours after Daniel called me. I felt the blood rush in my ears. Maybe the bracelet was wrong, a clerical error. Or maybe Daniel had called me before the birth. No, I remembered his words distinctly. "He's here, Dad. He's out. He's perfect." I looked at the bracelet again. It wasn't handwritten. It was printed, and then I noticed something else. The hospital name on the bracelet. St. Jude's Medical Center. Daniel had told me the birth mother was at Mercy General. They had driven to Mercy General. I had sent flowers to Mercy General. Why did the bracelet say St. Jude's? I closed the book quickly as I heard footsteps in the hallway. I shoved it back onto the shelf and turned around just as Jessica walked in. She stopped in the doorway, her smile tight. "Dad," she said, her voice slightly too loud for the nursery. "I was wondering where you went. People are asking for you." She looked at me, then at the book on the shelf, then back at me. Her eyes narrowed by a fraction of a millimeter. "Just getting some grandpa time," I said, forcing a smile. "He's a beautiful boy, Jess." "He is," she said, walking over and taking Leo from my arms. Her grip was firm, possessive. "But he needs his feeding now. Why don't you go downstairs? Daniel is looking for you." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal.
"Sure,"
I said. "I'll head down." I walked past her, feeling the tension radiating off her body like heat. As I reached the door, I paused.
"Jess,"
I said.
"Yes."
She didn't turn around. She was busy fussing with Leo's blanket. "That woman?" I said. "Sarah, she seemed very specific about the time." Jessica froze. Her shoulders went rigid. "Crazy people fixate on weird things, Robert," she said coldly. "Don't let her ruin the day." "Right," I said. "Of course not." I walked out of the nursery, my legs feeling like lead. I didn't go downstairs. I went into the guest bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet to drown out any noise, and then I pulled out my phone. I typed in St. Jude's Medical Center birth records. Nothing public, of course. Then I typed in Sarah Nurse St. Jude's. A few results came up. One was a LinkedIn profile. Sarah Jenkins, RN, head of neonatal care, St. Jude's Medical Center. Employment ended. April 2025. April, 1 month before the baby was born. If she was fired in April, how did she know about a baby born in May? Unless she didn't know about this baby. Unless she knew about something else. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the tile floor. My son had called me at 10:15 a.m. from Mercy General. The baby was born at 20:42 p.m. at St. Jude's. 2 different hospitals. 2 different times. Which meant there were 2 different stories. And if there were 2 stories, that meant one of them was a lie. And looking at the fear in Jessica's eyes, I had a sinking feeling that the lie was the one living in this house. The party wound down around sunset. The guests left with expensive party favors. Custom candles scented like new beginnings, and buzzed with gossip about the crazy woman at the gate. I watched them go. feeling like an actor on a stage who had forgotten his lines. I stayed behind to help clean up, or at least that was my excuse. In reality, I couldn't leave. I couldn't go back to my empty house with these questions burning a hole in my chest. Daniel was in the kitchen, loosening his tie and nursing a beer. He looked exhausted. What a day. He sighed, leaning against the marble island. Jess is upstairs putting Leo down for real this time. She's pretty shaken up. I can imagine, I said, grabbing a trash bag and starting to gather the discarded napkins. Dan, about the adoption. He looked up wary. What about it? The agency. This Elena woman, did you ever meet her? Yeah.
Of course, Daniel said.
We met her 3 or 4 times. Very professional, high-end office downtown. Why? And the birth mother, I asked. Did you meet her? Daniel hesitated. He took a long sip of his beer. It was a closed adoption, Dad. You know that. We saw profiles, medical history. But Elena handled the communication. The birth mother. She was young. She wanted anonymity. We respected that.
Right?
I said. And at the hospital. At Mercy General. You didn't see her then? No. Daniel said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. Elena brought the baby to us in the private waiting room. That's how these things work sometimes. To protect the mother's identity. Dad, why are you asking this? Is this about what that woman screamed? I'm just worried. I lied. I want to make sure everything is watertight. Legally. So she can't come back. It's watertight, Daniel said firmly. We have the papers. We have the decree. Leo is ours. He sounded so sure, so desperate to be sure. I didn't have the heart to tell him about the bracelet yet. Not until I knew more. If I was wrong, I would be destroying his happiness for nothing. But if I was right, I was saving him from a felony. Okay, I said. I'm going to head out soon. Just let me use the restroom upstairs. Sure, Dad. I went upstairs, but I didn't go to the restroom. The house was large, and the thick carpets muffled my footsteps. I could hear Jessica's voice coming from the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I crept closer, holding my breath. She knows Elena. I don't know how she knows, but she was here. Jessica was whispering. Her voice was a hiss of panic. Pause! I don't care if she signed an NDA! She was screaming about the time of birth!
She knows about the switch!
The switch. The blood drained from my face. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart thumping so loud I was sure she could hear it. Daniel doesn't know. Jessica continued. He thinks we were at Mercy the whole time. If he finds out the birth mother at Mercy changed her mind. My knees nearly gave out. The birth mother at Mercy changed her mind. That was it. The missing piece. The baby Daniel thought they were adopting, the one they waited for at Mercy General, wasn't Leo. That mother had backed out. It happens. It's tragic, but it happens. But Jessica hadn't accepted it. You promised me a baby, Elena? Jessica said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly cold tone. I paid you $200,000 specifically for a guaranteed placement. You told me you had a backup at St. Jude's. You told me the mother was a junkie who wouldn't remember giving birth. You said it was clean. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop a gasp from escaping. A backup. Fix this, Jessica snapped. Find Sarah. Pay her off, threaten her. I don't care. Just make her go away. If Daniel finds out this isn't the baby we waited for, if he finds out we bought a baby off the books, I will take you down with me. Do you understand? She hung up the phone. I backed away, moving as fast and as quietly as I could. I made it to the stairs and practically ran down them, my mind reeling. This wasn't just an illegal adoption. This was human trafficking. Jessica had paid for a baby. When the legitimate adoption fell through, the agency, this Elena woman, had procured another child from a vulnerable woman at a different hospital, likely without proper consent, and sold him to Jessica to keep the money. And Daniel didn't know. He thought Leo was the baby they were matched with. He thought the private waiting room handoff was protocol, not a way to hide the fact that the baby had been trafficked from across town. I reached the bottom of the stairs just as Daniel came out of the kitchen. You okay, Dad? He asked. You look pale.
Just a headache, I stammered.
I need to go home. I'll call you tomorrow. Okay, drive safe. I walked out of the house, the cool night air hitting my face. I got into my car, but I didn't start the engine immediately. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, looking up at the lit window of the master bedroom where Jessica was plotting to cover up a crime. I looked at the window of the nursery, where an innocent baby boy lay sleeping, a baby named Noah, who had been stolen from his mother because my daughter-in-law couldn't handle another failure. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't confront Jessica. She was too dangerous, too desperate, and I couldn't tell Daniel yet. He would either not believe me or he would confront her and blow the whole thing up before we had proof. I needed Sarah. I started the car and pulled out of the driveway. As I turned onto the main road, I remembered the glimpse I had of Sarah's car. It was a Honda Accord. I had seen the license plate as she reversed. Just partial, IL459 or something. But I had something better. I had her name, Sarah Jenkins, and I knew she used to work at St. Jude's. I drove home, my mind formulating a plan. I wasn't just a retired architect anymore. I was a man on a mission. I was going to find Sarah Jenkins, and together we were going to burn Jessica's perfect world to the ground. The morning after the party, I woke up with a headache that had nothing to do with champagne and everything to do with the heavy, dark secret I was now carrying. My house felt different. The silence, usually a comfort, now felt like an accusation. Every time I looked at the framed photo of Daniel and Jessica on my mantel, smiling, happy, innocent, I felt a wave of nausea. I spent the first 2 hours of the day on my computer. I wasn't an investigator, but I knew how to find things. Architects are detail-oriented by trade. We notice the cracks in the foundation before the building falls. I started with Elena and Adoption Agency Chicago. There were dozens of agencies, but only a few that fit the profile of high-end and private. I cross-referenced them with recent complaints or legal issues. Nothing obvious popped up. These people operated in the shadows, under layers of LLCs and confidentiality agreements. Then I went back to Sarah Jenkins. I found old address listed in a public directory from 3 years ago. It was in a working-class neighborhood on the south side of the city about 40 minutes from my place. It was a long shot. People move, especially people who get fired and seem to be spiraling. But it was the only lead I had. I dressed in simple clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, a baseball cap. I didn't want to look like the wealthy grandfather from the party. I wanted to look like someone who could be trusted. I drove my old pickup truck instead of my sedan. The drive was tense. My mind kept replaying Jessica's voice.
I don't care if she signed an NDA. She knows about the switch.
The neighborhood was a stark contrast to Daniel's gated community. The houses were small bungalows, some well-kept, others peeling and tired. I found the address. A small brick house with a chain link fence. The grass was overgrown, and the blinds were drawn tight. And there, parked in the driveway, was the rusted Honda Accord. My heart leaped. She was here. I parked a few houses down and walked up to the front door. I could hear a dog barking inside as I approached. I hesitated before knocking. What was I going to say? Hi, I'm the guy who watched security drag you away yesterday. Can we chat about human trafficking? I took a breath and knocked 3 times. The barking intensified. Hush, Buster! A voice yelled from inside. It was her. I heard locks turning, 3 of them. The door cracked open a few inches, held by a chain. Sarah's face appeared in the gap. She looked worse than yesterday. Her eyes were swollen, and she was wearing a bathrobe. She recognized me instantly. Her eyes narrowed. She hissed. What do you want? Did she send you? Is this the part where you threatened me? No, I said, holding up my hands. No threats. I'm Robert, Daniel's father. I'm the one you yelled at about the birth certificate. So, she spat. Go away. I checked it, I said quickly, before she could slam the door. She froze. What? I checked the bracelet. I whispered, leaning closer to the door. It said 141042 24:2 p.m. St. Jude's Medical Center. My son called me at 10:15 a.m. from Mercy General saying the baby was born. Sarah stared at me. The hostility in her eyes slowly morphed into shock, and then a flickering hope. You checked? She asked, her voice trembling. I know about the switch, Sarah. I lied. Well, partially lied. I knew of it, but I didn't know the details. I heard Jessica on the phone. She said the birth mother at Mercy changed her mind. She said Elena fixed it. Sarah closed her eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. She undid the chain and opened the door wide. Come in, she said, quickly. The inside of the house was cluttered but clean. Piles of paperwork covered the dining table. Medical journals, legal pads, printouts. It looked like the war room of a conspiracy theorist, but I knew now that the conspiracy was real. Do you want coffee? She asked, tightening her robe. Her hands were shaking. No, thank you, I said. I want to know the truth, all of it. She sat down at the table and gestured for me to join her. She pushed a stack of papers toward me. I was the head nurse in the NICU at St. Jude's for 15 years. Sarah began, her voice steadying as she slipped into professional mode. We saw a lot of heartbreaking cases. Addicts, teenagers, people who couldn't care for their babies. But we also saw Elena. Who is she? I asked. Elena Vance. She runs New Beginnings Family Services. On paper, it's a boutique adoption agency. In reality, it's a broker for the desperate rich. Sarah's lip curled. She has connections in hospitals all over the city. Nurses, social workers, people she pays to tip her off when a low-risk mother comes in. Low risk. Low risk of fighting back, Sarah clarified grimly. Women who are homeless, addicted, undocumented. Women who don't have support systems. Elena swoops in, offers them help, gets them to sign papers they don't understand while they're high or in labor. And if they change their mind, what happens? She makes sure they can't found, Sarah said. She threatens them with CPS, with jail, with deportation. She scares them into silence. I felt sick. And Noah. Sarah's face crumpled. She pulled a photo from under a notebook. It was a grainy picture of a newborn in a hospital bassinet. Noah's mother is a girl named Chloe. Sarah said softly. She's 19. She's not an addict. She's not homeless. She was a student who got in trouble and was scared to tell her parents. She came to St. Jude's alone. She intended to give the baby up, yes. She was working with a legitimate state agency. So what happened? She changed her mind, Sarah said, tears welling up again. Once she held him, you know how it is. She decided she wanted to keep him. She told the social worker on duty. But the social worker was on Elena's payroll. I gripped the edge of the table. Elena got the call that Jessica's birth mother at Mercy, the legitimate one, had backed out at the last second. Sarah continued. Jessica was hysterical. She threatened to sue Elena, to ruin her. Elena needed a baby fast, and there was Chloe alone in room 304 with a baby boy she wanted to keep. God, I whispered. They told Chloe that Noah had complications. Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They told her he needed to be transferred to a specialist unit. They took him out of the room. Chloe signed transfer papers, thinking she was saving his life. But they weren't transfer papers. They were surrender papers buried in a stack of medical forms. And then they walked him out the back door, Sarah said. I saw them. I saw Elena herself putting the carrier into her car. I tried to stop her. I asked for the discharge papers. She showed me the form Chloe signed. It looked legal. But I knew. I went to Chloe's room. She was crying, waiting for the doctor to tell her how her baby was. When I told her, Sarah choked back a sob. When I realized what they had done, I went to the administration. I went to the police. But Elena, she's powerful. The paperwork was in order. Chloe was painted as a confused, hysterical teenager who regretted her decision. I was fired for violating patient privacy and harassing a reputable agency. So Noah is a stolen baby, I said, the reality settling on me like a lead blanket. And my son, he has no idea. He looked at me yesterday like I was insane, Sarah said. But your daughter-in-law, she knows. Maybe she didn't know the specifics of how it was done, but she knew she was getting a baby that wasn't hers. She knew she was paying for a fix. She paid $200,000, I said, remembering the phone call. Sarah let out a sharp laugh. Chloe didn't see a dime of that. She's living in a shelter now, trying to get a lawyer who will listen to her. But who listens to a 19-year-old girl against a wealthy family in a high-powered agency? I will, I said. Sarah looked at me, stunned. I will listen, I repeated. And we are going to get Noah back to his mother. How? Sarah asked. They have the law on their side. They have the papers. Papers can be forged, I said. And lies have a way of unraveling. But we need proof. Hard proof. Not just your word against theirs. We need to prove that Jessica knew. We need to prove the timeline. The hospital records at St. Jude's are locked down, Sarah said. But I have friends there. Nurses who are scared but know what happened. Good, I said. We start there. But I need to get closer to Jessica. I need to get her to admit it or find the paper trail she's hiding. She's dangerous, Robert, Sarah warned. A woman who buys a baby won't hesitate to hurt anyone who tries to take him away. I know, I said. But she's never met a grandfather who just found out his grandson is a hostage. I stood up. I need to meet Chloe. Can you arrange that? Sarah nodded slowly. She's terrified. But if you tell her you're the grandfather, maybe she'll trust you. Tell her I'm not the grandfather, I corrected gently. Tell her I'm the man who is going to help her get her son back. I left Sarah's house with a plan forming in my mind. It was risky. It was dangerous. It involved betraying my own son, spying on my family, and potentially sending my daughter-in-law to prison. But as I drove back toward the suburbs, picturing the face of that little boy, Noah, I knew I had no choice. The grand celebration had been a funeral for the truth. Now it was time for the resurrection. The next week was a masterclass in deception. I, Robert Miller, honest architect and loving father, became a spy in my own family's life. I started visiting Daniel and Jessica's house every day. I played the role of the doting grandpa perfectly. I brought gifts, plush toys, clothes, a handmade wooden mobile for the crib. I offered to babysit so Jessica could rest. Jessica was suspicious at first. She watched me like a hawk, her eyes tracking my every movement when I was near the nursery. But I was careful. I never mentioned Sarah. I never mentioned the hospital. I just cooed over Leo and told Jessica what a wonderful mother she was. Flattery, I learned, is the best camouflage. Jessica was desperate for validation. She wanted everyone to tell her that she deserved this baby, that the universe had finally balanced the scales. The more I praised her, the more she relaxed. You're a natural. Jess, I told her one afternoon as she fed the baby. He's so bonded to you already. She smiled, a genuine, soft smile that almost made me feel guilty. Almost. I feel like he's always been mine, she whispered. Like the waiting didn't matter. Because you stole him, I thought, but I just nodded. He's a lucky boy. While Jessica was letting her guard down, I was working. My first objective was the paper trail. Jessica was an event planner. She was organized. She kept records of everything. I knew there had to be a file, a folder, something where she kept the documents from Alina. I waited for my opportunity. It came on a Thursday. Daniel was at work, and Jessica had a spy appointment, self-care, she called it. The nanny Maria was there, but she was easy to distract. Maria, I said, walking into the kitchen with a confident stride. I'm going to watch the little guy for an hour. Why don't you take a break? Go grab a coffee, take a walk, I insist. Maria looked hesitant. Mrs. Miller said I should stay close. I'm his grandfather, I said with a warm laugh. I think I can handle a nap time. Besides, look at you, you look tired. Go on. I'll cover for you if she gets back early. Maria smiled, grateful. Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'll just be in the garden. Perfect. As soon as she was out the back door, I moved. I went straight to Daniel's home office. I knew Daniel kept his files in the metal cabinets, but Jessica, she had her own workspace, a sunroom converted into an office. I went to the sunroom. It was pristine. White desk, white shelves, white binders. I started going through the drawers. Invoices for flowers, catering contracts, tax documents. Nothing about the adoption. I checked the bookshelf. Wedding albums, design books. Then I saw it, a small locked safe box tucked behind a row of oversized art books. It wasn't a heavy-duty safe, just a fireproof document box. I tried the latch. Locked. I looked around the desk. Where would she keep the key? Jessica was predictable. She liked things to be accessible but hidden. I checked the pen holder. Nothing. I checked the top drawer under the stationery tray. Nothing. Then I remembered her keychain. She had a bulky keychain with a dozen keys, but she never took it with her when she went to the spa. She just took the car fob. I ran to the mudroom by the garage door. Her house keys were hanging on the hook. I grabbed them and ran back to the office. My hands were sweating. I tried the small silver keys. The first one didn't fit. The second one jammed. The third one clicked. The lid popped open. Inside there was a single manila envelope. No label. I opened it. My breath hitched. It was everything. There were emails printed out. Emails between Jessica and E. Vance. Date May 12th, 11:30 a.m. From E. Vance, subject urgent solution. Jessica, per our conversation, the primary placement has withdrawn. I have a secondary option available immediately at St. Jude's. The biological mother is currently incapacitated. We can facilitate a transfer if you can wire the additional $50,000 consultant fee within the hour. This needs to be seamless. Do you authorize? Date May 12th, 11:45 a.m. From Jessica Miller, subject urgent solution. I don't care about the fee. Just get me the baby. Daniel thinks we are still at Mercy. I need you to bring the baby to the waiting room at Mercy as soon as you have him. Do whatever you have to do. I am not leaving without a child today. I felt like I was going to vomit. Do whatever you have to do. Under the emails was a wire transfer receipt for $50,000 to a shell company called Consulting Solutions LLC. And at the bottom, a copy of the surrender form for baby boy Doe. Signed by Chloe S.? The signature was shaky, barely legible. It looked like it had been signed by someone who could barely hold a pen. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. I photographed every page, every email, every receipt. I made sure the dates and headers were clear. I was just finishing when I heard the front door open.
Maria, I'm back early. The Massey's canceled.
Jessica, I froze. The safe was open. The papers were out. I shoved the papers back into the envelope. I slammed the lid of the safe box.
I locked it. Dad, are you here? I see your truck.
She was walking toward the kitchen. The sunroom was down the hall. I had seconds. I shoved the box back behind the books. I ran to the mudroom, my socks slipping on the hardwood floor. I hung the keys back on the hook, just as Jessica turned the corner into the hallway. She saw me standing in the mudroom, panting slightly. Robert, she asked, startled. What are you doing in here? I was just looking for the garage opener. I improvised breathlessly. I thought I left my phone in my truck, and I didn't want to trigger the alarm. She stared at me. Her eyes dropped to my hands, which were empty. Then she looked at the keys hanging on the hook. They were still swinging slightly from the force of me dropping them. She looked back at me. Her expression hardened. "You're sweating," she said. "It's warm in here," I said, forcing a chuckle. "And I was running around with Leo earlier. He's asleep now." She didn't smile. She walked past me into the kitchen and set her purse down. "You shouldn't be snooping around, Robert. It's rude." "I wasn't snooping, Jess, I told you." "I know what you're doing," she interrupted, turning to face me. Her voice was low, dangerous. "You think I don't see the way you look at me? You think I don't know you went to see that nurse?" My blood ran cold. "How did she know?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said steadily. "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "I have alerts set up, Robert. I know you looked up Sarah Jenkins. I know you've been asking questions." She took a step closer. For a petite woman, she was terrifying in that moment. "Let me be clear," she said. "Leo is my son. Daniel is happy. We are a family. If you try to ruin this, if you try to take my baby away, you will lose everything. You will lose your son. You will lose access to your grandchild. And I will make sure Daniel hates you for the rest of his life. Do you understand?" It was a declaration of war. I looked her in the eye. I didn't flinch. "I understand you perfectly, Jessica," I said. "Good," she said. "Now get out of my house." I walked out. I didn't look back. I had the photos. I had the proof. But now the clock was ticking. She knew I knew. She would destroy the evidence. She might even run. I got into my truck and drove straight to Sarah's house. But I didn't just go to Sarah. I told her to call Chloe. It was time to meet the mother. Chloe was staying in a small studio apartment that Sarah was paying for. When I walked in, I was struck by how young she looked. She was tiny, with dark circles under her eyes and hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was sitting on a futon, hugging a pillow. She looked up when I entered. She looked terrified. "Chloe," Sarah said gently. "This is Robert. He's the grandfather." Chloe flinched. She looked at me like I was a monster. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said, sitting on the chair opposite her. I kept my voice low, gentle. "I saw your baby."
Noah, he's beautiful.
Tears instantly spilled down her cheeks. "Is he okay? Is he eating? Does he cry?" "He's perfect," I said. "And he misses you." She sobbed, burying her face in the pillow. They made me sign. I didn't know. "I thought he was sick." "I know," I said. I pulled out my phone and showed her the picture of the email I had found. The one where Jessica said, "Do whatever you have to do." "This is the woman who has him," I said. She knew. She paid for them to trick you. Chloe stared at the screen. Her sorrow turned into something else. Anger. Hot, righteous anger. She knew. She whispered.
"Yes."
I said, "And we are going to make her pay. But we have to be smart. We can't just go to the police yet. Elena has judges in her pocket. Jessica has high-priced lawyers. If we go legal now, they will bury us in paperwork for years while Noah grows up without you. So what do we do?" Sarah asked. "We need Daniel," I said. "He's a good man. He's been lied to just as much as you have. If he knows the truth, if he sees the truth, he will do the right thing. He will give Noah back." "How do we get him to see it?" Chloe asked. "As her husband. We're going to crash a party," I said grimly. I knew that in 2 days Daniel and Jessica were hosting a sip and see, a smaller, more intimate dinner for the godparents and close family who couldn't make the big bash. It was the perfect stage. "I need you to come with me," I told Chloe. "I need you to look him in the eye and tell him your story. Not screaming at a gate, but sitting at his table. I won't let us in," Sarah said.
He will, I said.
"Because I have a key." The night of the dinner party arrived. The air was thick with humidity, a storm threatening to break. I drove my sedan this time. Chloe was in the passenger seat, wearing a nice dress Sarah had bought her. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. Sarah was in the back, holding a folder of documents. Copies of the emails, the medical records, the affidavits. We pulled up a block away. I didn't want to alert security. We walked the rest of the way, cutting through the neighbor's yard. The neighbor I had known for 20 years. We slipped through the side gate of Daniel's garden. We could see them through the glass walls of the dining room. Candlelight, wine, laughter. Jessica was at the head of the table, looking triumphant. Daniel was holding Leo, bouncing him gently. I felt a pang of heartbreak for my son. This was going to destroy him. But it had to be done. I used my key to open the back kitchen door. It was unlocked. Caterers were moving in and out. We slipped into the kitchen. The staff looked at us, confused. "Family surprise," I whispered, putting a finger to my lips. They shrugged and went back to plating the tiramisu. We walked to the dining room doors. I took Chloe's hand. "Deeply breathe," I whispered. "Just tell the truth." I pushed the doors open. The conversation stopped instantly. 12 faces turned toward us. "Dad," Daniel asked, standing up. He looked confused. I thought you said you weren't feeling well. Jessica dropped her fork. It clattered loudly on the china. Her face went white. She looked at me, then at Sarah, then at the young girl holding my hand. She knew instantly who Chloe was. Who are these people? One of the guests asked.
Get out,
Jessica whispered.
Then she screamed it. Get out, Daniel, call the police.
They're trespassing.
No one is calling the police, I said, my voice booming in the room. I walked forward, pulling Chloe with me. Dad, what is going on? Daniel asked, clutching Leo tighter. Who is this? Daniel, I said, stopping at the end of the table. This is Chloe. She's 19 years old. I pointed at the baby in his arms. And she is Noah's mother. The silence in the room was deafening. What? Daniel looked at the baby, then at Chloe. No, that's impossible. The birth mother is. The birth mother at Mercy backed out Daniel, I said. Jessica didn't tell you that, did she? Daniel looked at his wife.
Jess.
What is he talking about? Jessica stood up, trembling with rage.
He's lying. He's senile. He's trying to ruin us because he's jealous. Get them out.
I have the emails. Daniel, I said calmly. Sarah stepped forward and tossed the folder onto the dining table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Daniel. I found them in her safe, I said. Emails from Elena. A wire transfer for $50,000. The instructions to steal a baby from St. Jude's because the Mercy adoption fell through. Daniel looked at the folder. He looked at Jessica. Her face was a mask of pure terror now. She lunged for the folder. Don't touch it, Daniel roared. It was the first time I had ever heard him yell at her. He snatched the folder before she could reach it. He opened it. He read the first page. Then the second. His hands started to shake. He looked at the receipt. Consulting Solutions, LLC. He looked up at Chloe. Chloe was crying silently, her eyes fixed on the baby in his arms. Is it true? Daniel asked, his voice breaking. He looked at Jessica. Did you buy this baby?
I did it for us! Jessica screamed, abandoning the denial. I did it so we could be a family. Daniel, look at him. He's ours.
Who cares where he came from? We saved him.
That girl, she couldn't take care of him. I gave him a life.
You stole him? Chloe whispered. You told me he was sick. You told me he was dying. Daniel looked at Jessica with a look of absolute horror. It was the look of a man realizing he had been sleeping next to a monster. You knew. Daniel whispered. You knew the birth mother wanted him?
She's a nobody. Jessica spat,
pointing at Chloe.
She's a child. She would have ruined his life. I am his mother.
I am the one who feeds him, who holds him. Give him to me. Daniel said. His voice was cold. Dead? No. Jessica said, backing away.
He's mine. Give him to me.
Daniel shouted. He walked around the table. Jessica tried to grab his arm, but he shrugged her off with a force that sent her stumbling back. He walked over to Chloe. The room held its breath. Daniel looked down at the baby he had loved for 3 weeks, the baby he thought was his son. Tears streamed down his face. He kissed the baby's forehead a soft, final goodbye. Then, gently, he placed Noah into Chloe's arms. Chloe gasped, clutching the baby to her chest. Noah stirred and let out a small cry. Chloe buried her face in his blanket, sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel turned to Jessica. It's over, he said. I'm calling the police. Daniel, no. Jessica shrieked, falling to her knees.
Don't do this. I love you.
I did it for you. You did it for yourself, Daniel said, turning his back on her. He looked at me. Dad, thank you. I nodded, feeling a heavy weight lift off my chest, replaced by the deep sadness of seeing my son's life shatter. But as I watched Chloe rocking her son, whispering to him, I knew we had done the right thing. The lie was over. The truth was out, but the war wasn't finished. Jessica was cornered, and Alina was still out there. And as sirens began to wail in the distance, I knew the fallout was just beginning. The arrival of the police was not the dramatic siren, wailing raid you see in movies. It was quieter, grimmer, and infinitely more terrifying because of it. After Daniel made the call, the atmosphere in the dining room shifted from explosive chaos to a suffocating purgatory. Jessica had stopped screaming. She sat on the floor near the buffet table, her expensive dress pulled around her, staring blankly at the wall. She looked like a broken doll. The guests had been ushered out by the catering staff, who were eager to flee the scene of the crime. I stood by the window, watching the flashing blue lights reflect off the wet pavement of the driveway. When the officers entered, 2 uniformed, 2 detectives, the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Who called it in? The lead detective asked. He was a wary-looking man with a notepad. I did, Daniel said. His voice was raspy, stripped of all emotion. He was still standing near Chloe, as if his physical presence could shield her and the baby from the woman on the floor. And the situation, my wife, Daniel pointed a trembling finger at Jessica. She purchased a child, illegally, she committed fraud, and kidnapping. Jessica didn't move. She didn't even blink. The next hour was a blur of statements and evidence collection. I handed over the folder, the emails, the wire transfer receipts, the falsified medical records. The detectives handled the papers with gloves, their eyebrows raising as they read the cold, transactional language of the emails. "You're Jessica Miller?" the detective asked, towering over her. She looked up. Her eyes were dry. The hysteria had burned off, leaving something cold and hard underneath. "I want my lawyer," she said. "I'm not saying a word without my lawyer." "That's your right," the detective said. "Stand up, please. Put your hands behind your back." Watching my daughter-in-law being handcuffed in the middle of her immaculate dining room was a surreal image I will never forget. The metal cuffs clicked shut with a sound of finality. As they walked her out, she paused at the door. She didn't look at Daniel. She looked at the baby in Chloe's arms. "He was happy here," she whispered. "I would have given him the world." "You gave him a lie," I said, unable to stay silent. She glared at me, pure venom in her eyes, before the officer guided her into the back of the cruiser. The aftermath of that night was a hurricane that tore through our lives. The story broke the next morning. Wealthy suburbanite arrested in black market baby ring. The media descended on the house like vultures. News vans camped at the end of the driveway for weeks. Daniel couldn't stay there. He moved back in with me, sleeping in his old bedroom like he was a teenager again, except now he was a 34-year-old man carrying the weight of a shattered life. But the arrest of Jessica was just the first domino. Because of the evidence I had gathered, specifically the emails identifying E. Vance, the police were able to secure a warrant for the New Beginnings agency the very next morning. I remember watching the raid on the news. It was a massive operation. The FBI had gotten involved because of the interstate nature of the wire fraud. They stormed the high-rise office building downtown. We watched footage of agents carrying out boxes and computers. And then we saw her, Alina Vance, the woman who had orchestrated it all. She was marched out in handcuffs, looking far less composed than Jessica. She was hiding her face from the cameras with a coat, but there was no hiding from what was coming. The investigation revealed a horror show. No, it wasn't the first baby. He was just the latest. Elena had been running this scheme for 5 years. She preyed on vulnerable young women, falsified consent forms, and sold the infants to wealthy couples who were tired of waiting on legitimate lists. In some cases, the adoptive parents knew. In others, they were duped just like Daniel. Daniel was cleared of all wrongdoing almost immediately. The emails proved he was a victim of the fraud, not a perpetrator. But being legally cleared didn't stop the emotional devastation. He spent his days meeting with lawyers and investigators. He had to file for an annulment of the adoption, a legal process that felt like erasing a person. He had to give statements against his wife. He had to dismantle the nursery. That was the hardest day. About 2 weeks after the arrest, Daniel asked me to go to the house with him. "I can't do it alone, Dad," he said. "I need to pack it up. I'm selling the house. I can't live there." We walked into the nursery. The sun was streaming in through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The crib was still made up with the expensive linens Jessica had chosen. The mobile I had carved was hanging still. Daniel walked over to the changing table. He picked up a small stuffed beer. He held it for a long time, his knuckles turning white. "I loved him, Dad," he whispered. "For 3 weeks. I was a dad. I loved him so much." "I know," I said, putting a hand on his back. "And that love was real, Dan. Even if the situation wasn't." "How could she?" he asked, his voice cracking. "How could she sleep next to me every night knowing she stole him? Knowing his mother was crying for him? She was sick," I said. "Obsession is a sickness." She wanted the picture-perfect life so badly that she stopped caring about the people in it. We packed the room in silence. We put the clothes, the toys, the books into boxes. Daniel insisted that we donate everything to a women's shelter, specifically the shelter where Chloe had been staying before Sarah took her in. "It should go to someone who needs it," he said. "Someone who is doing it the right way." As we were loading the boxes into my truck, a car pulled up. It was Sarah, and in the back seat was Chloe, with Noah in a car seat. Daniel froze. He hadn't seen them since the night of the dinner party. Sarah got out. "We heard you were clearing the house," she said. "Chloe wanted to see you." Chloe stepped out. She looked different. Stronger. The terror was gone from her eyes, replaced by a quiet resilience. She was holding Noah. Daniel stood there, paralyzed. Chloe said softly. Daniel choked out. Chloe hesitated. "I wanted to say thank you for what you did that night. You could have fought me. You had the baby in your arms. You could have made it hard." "He's your son," Daniel said simply. "He was never mine." Chloe looked down at the baby. He's wearing the onesie you gave him, she said. The blue one with the clouds. Daniel looked at the baby. A mixture of pain and love washed over his face. He looks good, Daniel said. He looks happy. He is? Chloe said. She took a step closer. Do you want to hold him? Just for a minute. I held my breath. I didn't know if this was a good idea. I didn't know if it would break Daniel completely. But Daniel nodded. He held out his arms, and Chloe carefully placed the baby in them. Daniel looked down at the boy he had named Leo, the boy who was actually Noah. He didn't cry this time. He just smiled a sad, sweet smile. He rocked him gently, the muscle memory still there. You take good care of your mom, okay? Daniel whispered to the baby. She fought for you. She fought the whole world for you. He handed Noah back to Chloe. Thank you, Daniel said to her, for letting me say goodbye properly. You're a good man, Daniel, Chloe said. I'm sorry she hurt you, too. As they drove away, Daniel stood in the driveway of the house he had built for a family that never existed. He watched the car disappear around the bend. Then he turned to me. Okay, he said, taking a deep breath. Let's finish loading the truck. I'm ready to go home. 6 months later, the trial began. It was the trial of the century for our quiet Chicago suburb. The courtroom was packed every single day. Jessica had tried to cut a deal, offering to testify against Alina in exchange for leniency. But the district attorney wasn't interested. They had enough evidence on Alina without Jessica's help. They wanted to make an example of everyone involved. I sat in the gallery every day, right behind Daniel. Jessica's parents sat on the other side of the aisle. They looked aged, withered. They wouldn't look at us. They had bailed Jessica out initially, but after the full extent of the emails came out, the way she referred to the baby as a solution and a product, even they had distanced themselves. Jessica's defense was diminished capacity. Her lawyer argued that the hormones, the stress of infertility, and the desperation had caused a psychotic break. He painted her as a victim of Alina's predatory practices. But the prosecution had the emails, they had the wire transfers. And they had me. When I took the stand, I didn't embellish. I just told the truth. I told them about the party. I told them about the way she dismissed Sarah. I told them about the conversation I overheard in the bedroom, the cold calculation in her voice when she said, I don't care if she signed an NDA. Jessica watched me from the defendant's table. She didn't cry. She just stared at me with a look of utter betrayal, as if I was the one who had destroyed the family, not her. But the most powerful testimony didn't come from me. It came from Chloe. When Chloe walked to the stand, the room went silent. She was small young, but she held her head high. She told the jury about the hospital room. She told them about the pressure, the lies, the way they told her baby was sick just to get her to sign a piece of paper. They stole the first moments of his life from me, Chloe said, her voice ringing clear in the courtroom. They let me believe my baby was dying while they were celebrating at a garden party with champagne. That isn't madness, that's evil. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty, on all counts. Human trafficking, fraud, forgery, kidnapping. Jessica let out a sob when the verdict was read. It was the first real emotion she had shown in months. She turned to Daniel, mouthing, Help me? Daniel sat stone-faced. He didn't look away, but he didn't reach out. He just watched justice happen. The sentencing was 2 weeks later. Elena Vance got 25 years. She was the ringleader, the architect of the suffering. Jessica got 12 years. As the bailiff led her away, she finally broke. She screamed Daniel's name. She screamed that she loved him. She screamed that she was sorry. But the heavy oak doors swung shut, silencing her pleas. It was over. Life, slowly, began to grow back in the scorched earth of the aftermath. Daniel sold the big house. He made a tidy profit, but he didn't want the money. He put half of it into a trust for Noah, an education fund that Chloe could access for the boy's schooling. He sent it anonymously through a lawyer, but I think Chloe knew where it came from. He used the rest to buy a smaller place, a fixer-upper in the city, closer to his work. He threw himself into his job, designing bridges. He told me once, over a beer on my porch, I like bridges, Dad. You build them to connect things, to get over the deep water. I liked that. As for me, the quiet of my house didn't feel so oppressive anymore. It felt peaceful. I got back into my woodworking. I finished the rocking horse I had started for Leo. I didn't give it to Noah. That felt like crossing a boundary. But I donated it to the local children's hospital in honor of the children who need a way home. Sarah, the nurse, was reinstated at a different hospital. She became a vocal advocate for adoption reform. We stayed in touch. We meet for coffee once a month. She tells me about Noah, showing me pictures from Chloe's social media which is private, but Sarah is allowed in. Noah's a chubby, happy baby with a mop of dark hair. He looks nothing like Daniel, of course, but when I look at his picture, I feel a strange sense of pride. Not because he's my blood, but because he's my victory. He is the life we saved, one afternoon in late autumn. About a year after the party, Daniel came over for Sunday dinner. We were grilling steaks in the backyard, watching the leaves fall. "I saw someone today," Daniel said casually, flipping a steak. "Oh," I asked, sipping my iced tea. "Someone we know?" "No," he said. "A woman. At the coffee shop near my office. We talked for a while. She's an architect, actually. Funny, right?"
Hilarious. I smiled. Is she nice?
"She seems real," Daniel said. He looked at me, and his eyes were clear. The shadows were gone. "That's all I'm looking for, Dad. Just something real. Real is good," I said. "Real is the only thing that matters." We ate dinner on the porch as the sun went down. It wasn't a lavish party. There was no string quartet, no catered food, no hundreds of guests. Just a father and son eating steak and talking about blueprints. I thought about Jessica, sitting in a cell, probably still convinced that she was the victim of a cruel universe. I thought about the emptiness of her perfection. And then I looked at my son, who had lost everything and survived. I thought about Chloe tucking her son into bed in a small apartment that was full of love. I realized then that family isn't about blood, and it certainly isn't about contracts or money, or pretending everything is perfect. Family is about the truth. It's about the people who stand by you when the walls come down. It's about the courage to do the right thing even when it breaks your heart. I raised my glass to the empty seat opposite me. To Martha, my late wife. She would have been proud of us. She would have been proud that we didn't let the lie win. "To the truth," I said softly. Daniel clinked his glass against mine. "To the truth." And in the quiet of the evening, that was enough. Thank you so much for reading my story. It was a painful journey, but sharing it feels like the final step in closing this chapter. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Jessica deserved the 12-year sentence, or was she just a victim of Elena's manipulation? And what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have investigated your own family? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life dramas, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us share these stories with the world. Take care of yourselves, and remember the truth always comes out eventually.